Hello everyone, this is Scott Weatherly, your regular host on my own today, just dropping you a little bit of a taster of what we are doing on Patreon. In every episode, we cover an extra film, but there's so much more on the Patreon. Julie and I get together and we talk about additional films linked with that main feed. So I wanted to give you a taster to see what's over there. The more discussions we're having, what we're thinking, what we're talking about, so you can then go over there and check it out. Check out our Patreon. Just for $5 a month, you get all these extra podcasts. Not just this, but trekking through the Twilight Zone as well as me giving my 30-minute thoughts on a regular basis, and promotional material regarding both what's coming up on the podcast and other things that we are doing. So please go check out the Patreon. Links are down below. It's at patreon.com/20cg media. That's 20th Century Geek Media. And check this episode out. Enjoy, and I'll see you on the Patreon.
How much of, if it's a cliched plot with a few plot holes, is that better than a very minimal plot? There's still an antagonist here, right? But
yes. Yes, there is, and I think it's an interesting sort of thing of what function do you put on dialogue in a film like this? Because you can tell the story, the plot and stuff is there. It's quite clear that there's a confrontation between the man and the brute. The man is injured. He ends up in this hospital with this doctor. But the doctor has also been, you've already seen that the doctor has been antagonizing the brute as well, because the brute's been leaving food out, and because he's wanting to get into the hospital. I'm assuming to get to this woman is the only thing. There's a couple of things you have to assume. But generally, you get the information that's there. It's there. But the thing that I find that this doesn't have, and this is what I'm saying about in a little bit more pantomime, is that, and the doctor's not bad at this. The doctor is probably the best at this. Is having he's got a character, he's got a very characteristic face. You can see he's a character actor, and he is able to give a sort of a raise of an eyebrow or a certain smile or something, and it's a bit more different to the others. I would say Jean Reno's a very good actor. I've seen him in quite a lot of things. I think he's very good. But in this, because he wants to keep him almost Terminator-esque, of sort of he's kind of relentless and sort of that's his job. That's all it is. So he's not there to be emotive. But even the man seems kind of devoid of emotion, flat. So if I've not got dialogue to give me something, then I need character to perform. And bloody mime is French, is it not?
Yes. That's a very good point. I agree with you. I mean, I think both those characters are very flat. I was surprised when the doctor came in and suddenly they're grunting, they're sort of making indicative sounds. The doctor is so expressive, and I thought, oh, this is a big part of what I was missing from earlier in the film. I really wanted that. And you think, it's strange to me what works and what doesn't. And I agree, I like a lot of the ideas here. I would sort of bump it up from some of those other kind of, middling films because it has that idea, because it's doing something a little different, in the same way that, it makes me think about it and remember it later, in the same way that The World, the Flesh, and the Devil, with its racial element, I feel like that elevates it slightly. I find myself thinking about those ideas. I could write an essay about it. I could write an essay about this. I'm not sure what my essay would be about, The Last Man on Earth, But so to me, those are kind of slightly elevated. But I mean, we're talking about a sort of very middling range of movies. And it's weird to me what works and what doesn't in cinema. And I feel like this has there's a lot of good ideas. There's talent here, but I agree that what I would want is to see the man break down. Just see him in profile, just holding his head. He doesn't have to be crying, but just holding his head, in this ruined landscape behind him. And just sort of, you see him limping after the fight, but you don't really, there's no glimpse into his internal suffering, right? No. All alone in this landscape.
And I think that's a really good point, is about the sort of getting into the inner monologue or the inner sort of like feelings of these characters, because we're not given. I think you and I have said this of other films where they'll sort of, you know, the dialogue is so spoon feeding where they're sort of like, I'm unhappy with what is going on. And you go, yeah, show, don't tell. Here's the perfect opportunity to be show, don't tell. And you say about it's a good idea. It does kind of elevate it. Remove the dialogue. That's a good pitch. It's the kind of thing you'd have in a film studies class where you're going to make a film and you can have no dialogue. And you go, oh, that's interesting. How would we do that? How would we convey this? How would we convey that? But it's almost like they said that and then they just went, well, they're going to grunt, but we're going to carry on doing everything else as normal. We're just going to have,
Yeah.
you go, well, no, again, this is an opportunity to really show expression or like,
Well,
you know,
well, if you're going to think of this as a film school project, and you're entirely correct about this, you should think, all right, cinema is a visual medium primarily. Audio came later, right? We
yeah,
can tell this story in expressions. We can show a character's pain. We can give you more emotional depth to these characters than other movies with dialogue. And that's what we're going to show, damn it. And instead, it just kind of is like, well, it's into that kind of nothingness, as you say, like a kind of like weird Zen minimalism, of
yeah.
like you're not going to know who the characters are, what they're feeling, what there's no dialogue, it's just gonna be stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure there must be films, and I haven't watched that many. I think of like The Artist, I think was actually a silent film, wasn't it? That
Mm,
sort of thing.
hmm
To be been done again. Um, but again, like there are characters in films that have been mute or have been silent or whatever. Or there's been, and you said like A Quiet Place. I'm not the biggest fan of A Quiet Place. I think it works as a concept, but it's like I'm not sure why it's onto its third film. But there you go. But again, even in that film, having watched the first one, they use silence in a way that actually
hmm
raises tension. They introduce like sign language. So when they do speak and they have certain things as to why, I mean, the silence is important. And so there's a scene in that film where Emily Blunt, who I will hold up as one of my favorite actresses, I think she's uh, massively underrated, but she gives birth in that film when she can't make sound because
mm,
of what's going on. And it's the almost the opposite. This is the opposite. They can't make sound in that film because of the monsters, because of the aliens and stuff. But they utilize that to the film to make you a tense horror sci-fi film. It works as a concept. It's very good. With this, it'd be in the other way of they can't talk. Okay, well, then you've got to play it out to utilize
hmm
that lack of communication to do something else to raise the stakes. All right, they can't have dialogue. Okay, well, is this confrontation between the man and the brute a miscommunication because they've not been able to talk?
hmm
Is
Good
there a
idea.
is
That's
there a
not here in the film.
no? It's not. Is there a
Yeah.
possibility of um that the doctor is hiding something, and and we will see it through visual means, and this other stuff. It's not going to be discussed. The lack of having not been able to talk should be a factor in how the story plays out and should be
Mhm.
expressed in some way, and it isn't. It just isn't, and that's kind of where I feel the most disappointment.
I agree with you. I agree with you about all of this. And I think that, you know, we gesture more when you and I talk
Yes.
than, the characters in this movie. And we can hear each other. Um, Characters don't gesture. And you think anytime you have to be quiet, you gesture more, you
Mm,
emote more with your face, you adapt, you learn a kind of sign language, as you say. And this is not interested in any of that. And I agree that's its big failing. I would say I'm now convinced, after talking to you, the best scene in the entire movie is the one scene that breaks this. And that is where they do speak. And they use the gas. The doctor has this gas that lets him um, make sounds with his vocal cord somehow. And
yes.
it's sort of like, oh, sure. Really rudimentary grunting like, and you can see for the first time, suddenly the man expresses emotion, and you can see the pain on his face as he's trying to make these words and what it means to him to speak even just this 2 syllables. And that is, weirdly, it's like suddenly they're emotional and you see for a second like the weight of not being able to speak and the toll it's taken on them. And then it's right back to no emoting for the rest of the movie.
Stood around again. And I agree, that's a really good point.